and welcome to the Committee on, here we go, Arts, Parks, Health, Aging, and Los Angeles River. And I am joined by my colleagues Joe Buscaino, and incoming right now is Mr. Tom LaBonge. And we're going to call this meeting to order.
We're going to do a presentation.
Colleagues, if there are no public comment cards, and there don't seem to be any public comment cards on anything other than item 9, I would like to take items 5 through 8 on consent without objection.
Can I look at that real quick? For a second. Yeah, just a quick question from staff on the summer lunch programs, Record Parks, just could, and then on the swim program, is it anything less than what it was last year? As far as being able to serve?
I'm sorry, Sophine Atkinson, Department of Recreation and Parks
Sure.
Grants Administration.
Sure.
I'm sorry, your question?
On the summer lunch program, okay?
It's item 6.
Right. Okay, is that anything different than last year? Are we keeping the level that we are, or is it going down, or are we increasing?
Actually, it seems like we've increased it.
Good job. Okay, great leadership. Now, on 8, on the swim grant program, I don't want to see them cut Glass Hill Park pool. I want to support you on that, Mitch. I know you're fighting for it. What about pool hours? How are we doing on that, on the next grant?
Including Peck Park Pool as well.
Very good. And Griffin Park pool, and Sherman Oaks pool.
This is a grant for team sports.
Good. So like we have at the Expo Center and other places.
Yes.
Good. This is a good thing, Mitch. I'm good set on all of them. Good.
All right, since you're up here, would you like to add anything?
Just thank you for supporting the programs. They are very popular, and they help a lot of youth.
Wonderful.
Mr. Chair, if I can, and
Yes, sir.
the team sports, does that also include swimming and water polo?
Yes.
Because we have a great program at Peck Park. I'm hearing some parents that their parents are telling me they may close the pool at Peck Park, but there's a number of team sports there.
This one is a swim team, water polo team,
Okay.
synchronized swimming, and dive.
So I can assure the parents some of these dollars will be used to Peck Park. That houses these types of team sports.
Peck Park is one of the pools that's on this,
Fantastic. Thank you.
benefits from this program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. And colleagues, I would like to note and file item 2. Commissioner nominee Silvano Mizrahi has withdrawn. And take items 1, 3, and 4 together. We have appointments to the Commission on Disability. We have Mr. Richard Rothenberg, Dr. Robert Bitonte, and Ms. Harriet Posner, and they are coming up at this time. Thank you, and welcome to the committee, and welcome to the panel. If you would, one by one, tell us a little bit about yourselves and your thoughts on your appointment.
I'm Dr. Robert Bitonte. I'm a physician specialist in physical medicine and rehabilitation. I've taken care of and served the disabled most of my career, and I am interested in coming to this commission to elevate awareness of the disabled and see if we can make life better for the disabled. I currently work for the California Department of Social Services doing disability evaluations on claimants for disability.
Terrific.
Mr. Chair, I'm Richard Rothenberg. I work as a commercial banker in Century City, and I've lived in Los Angeles my whole life, and this is my first time to be asked to serve, and I'm eager to do so. I don't appear outwardly disabled, but I have Parkinson's disease, so I'm representing the disabled community, and I look forward to bringing that viewpoint as well. I serve on the Michael J. Fox Foundation Patient Council Committee, so I've got some expertise in the area of dealing with the public and disability.
Terrific. Welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Harriet Posner. I've spent the last 30 years as a practicing lawyer at a law firm doing all sorts of civil litigation and government investigations, and have handled a number of class actions that have to do with discrimination and ADA compliance and dealing with governmental investigations, and have served on a number of boards, including legal aid and mental health advocacy services, among others, and have a deep interest in disability issues and making sure that the city is doing everything that it can to make accommodations and make the city more livable.
Terrific, thank you. And I just have two questions, and just kind of give me your general thoughts. What do you see as the biggest challenges confronting the Commission on Disability, and what are some areas of particular interest of yours personally?
My particular interest is the evolving aging of the population and the silent brain injury, acquired brain injury that happens as we age. And so brain injury is my current area of interest. I think that that's a silent type of disability, and we need more awareness for it.
Mr. Chair, will you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. Just your areas that you are particularly interested in focusing on, and then what you see as some of the biggest challenges facing this commission.
Okay. I'm interested in working with family issues and both elderly and school-aged children. I'm interested in the commission's ability to work with other commissions to help implement the changes that the city wants to put forth in disability and other issues. Challenges is awareness, I think, for the community of disabled people is pretty vast, and the challenges that we face are important to me personally and to my family and to my community.
Thank you.
Well, I have interest in looking at the description of what the department does. I mean, there are a lot of issues there that resonate with me, AIDS issues and aging issues. And to me, the biggest challenges are figuring out how to how to triage what needs to be done in a fashion that makes sense and is organized and maximizes the resources that are available to the city and the department to deal with the issues.
Terrific, thank you. Mr. LeBunch.
One thing, Steve Simon is the general manager of the department, very effective employee leadership. You have one of the best offices in all the city. You lucked out at North Figueroa there with the former bank. I just toured it last week, and it's very impressive and dedicated staff. The one question I'd love to see answered is in the city of Los Angeles from San Pedro to Chatsworth, there's a bunch of zip codes. And the state will know through their filing what zip code has the highest number of people who are physically challenged, let's just say. So then, and I'm going to flip it over to Mr. Buscayuna in a minute, who's the king of sidewalks right now, where should we concentrate our money on fixing sidewalks? You know, where should we concentrate for the disability challenges that people have? Where are the curb cuts? I'd rather spend it all in the highest zip code first than to do it by 15. We cut the pie by 15. So it's a small piece of pie. So I just want that challenge to you. And also, I think there's nothing like representing people, truly, and as a commissioners, you'll be representing people who really need the love and the opportunity, and it's phenomenal. A lot of our veterans now are coming back disabled or challenged, and that's something that I hope that you could have somebody on the commission focus on directly. And also, I know the other thing, too, the immersion program that LA Unified has done is tremendous in a lot of ways. You know, in a lot of ways. They closed the school in my district and immersed it with a regular elementary school, Francis Glenn. And I just hope you watch that, because some people need special care, right, fully gripped arms around, or sometimes when you immerse, that good things happen to everybody, those who are not challenged, those who are challenged, and trying to, make it through the day and learn. So those are just a few things. I thank you for your service. It's a very special department, and you're very special people. Thank the mayor for Mr. Garcetti for nominating you.
Thank you, Mr. Katz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for agreeing to serve on the commission. We owe it to you. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, with an incredible allowance to zero. But we appreciate your commitment to our city, and thank the mayor for putting forward some fine candidates. I'm looking forward to your full approval in front of our colleagues in the coming week or so. I wanted to get your thoughts on housing for the disabled. Just recently in Harbor Gateway, we just broke ground on the 70-unit complex, residential complex for disabled veterans. In time of need throughout the city of Los Angeles, we're thirsting for more housing. And what role do you plan on playing in being the advocate for housing for our disabled community?
The disabled veterans are coming back with largely musculoskeletal problems, loss of limbs. But one of the silent disabilities that they have now are traumatic brain injury and the attendant mental conditions that go along with that, such as PTSD. So I think that beyond looking at their loss of limbs, they need to be evaluated for their traumatic brain injuries, and that considered in the housing.
Thank you.
I think that having consideration for the veterans that are coming back with injuries is a priority to me as well, and bringing them into the community, welcoming them, providing service to them, and being of service.
Thank you.
I agree. I was happy that Councilmember Labange mentioned veterans, because it was neglectful of me not to mention that they're a very, very important group of folks that we need to do much better for in this city and all other cities. So I don't know what the powers of the commission are to help on that front in terms of housing, but we have to have that be a priority.
I will say this, there are a number of affordable housing motions being heard currently, so and one specifically calls out housing for veterans. So I'm sure this topic will be coming your way in one form or another, and we welcome and encourage your participation in this conversation on how we're going to do better at that. So really appreciate it. Well, I think we're on our way to unanimous support
Move to approve, yes.
of Ms. Posner and Dr. Rothenberg and Dr. Bittoni. Thank you so much. And thanks for stepping up again and volunteering. And without objection, I think we're advancing you to the full council, and I believe it's Wednesday morning on the 30th. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next, yes, they do deserve a round of applause. Item number 9, Mr. Lidd.
Item number 9, motion, Clarence, Labange, O'Farrell, relative to instructing the Department of Recreation and Parks and any other relevant city departments to report within 30 days on the policies and procedures that dictate the use of poisons to control the rodent population in the parks and hillside areas of Los Angeles, including the Santa Monica Mountains, Hollywood Hills, and Griffith Park.
And before we have our presentation, I'm going to invite our esteemed colleague, Paul Koretz, who is going to come up and say a few words about this item. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Hey. Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Human beings are always trying to build a better mousetrap, but what we sometimes do is build a worse one, as we have in this case. When I introduced this item with Mr. Labange back in November, I didn't know that much about rodenticides. We had read reports of bobcats coming down with mange because of their exposure to some sort of rat poison. We thought we should look into it in our own backyard in Griffith Park and in the hills. Now, just a few months later, I can't believe how widespread the problem is. Nearly every week, someone tells me about or shows me a photo of another animal or bird that is being poisoned simply by doing what they do naturally, which is eating rodents. We should be encouraging animals to take care of the rodents for us. Nothing is cheaper or more effective than an ecosystem working like it's supposed to. Instead of our thanks, what these predators and raptors get is poisoned. These are hawks, owls, eagles, foxes, coyotes, bobcats, raccoons, and most recently our famous Hollywood Hills mountain lion. A U.S. National Park survey found that 92% of the dead bobcats they analyzed tested positive for rodenticides. 92%. And guess what? Bobcats are not rodents, and we need to stop poisoning them. Maine's just taken over vehicle collisions as the #1 cause of death for bobcats in Southern California. A population was dropped by 50% during the study. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife warns particularly against over-the-counter rodenticides such as Decon, which are strictly to be used indoors and are illegal to use in open areas or fields. I know we have health department standards we must meet surrounding rodents, but especially in our ecologically sensitive areas, we have to find a way to do it that doesn't destroy everything else too. I want to see us include as a city accounting for the ecosystem services of our predators and raptors as part of our rodent control program. If an owl eats 1,000 rodents a year, which they're very capable of, put that in the accounting sheet as well as the cost, $0. Tell us how many rodents bobcats eat, and hawks and coyotes, and then we'll be accounting for how important it is to protect those populations because they provide us their services for free. Then we need to find a safe, non-invasive way to control the rest of the rodent population. Something that doesn't kill the beautiful, magical creatures that we share our city with. I like to think of our now famous Hollywood Hills mountain lion, whom you have a before and after picture of, as a symbol of the new LA, a place where instead of the smog I grew up with, we have mountain views. A place where people bring reusable bags to the grocery store instead of littering plastic bags in our rivers and neighborhoods. And a place where we peacefully and happily and safely coexist within our wild urban environment. Let's keep our mountain lions safe and stop the madness of these rodenticides. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to call the Department of Recreation and Parks, who are compelled by this motion to report on this issue. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Ramon Barajas, Assistant General Manager for Department of Recreation and Parks, and I have Laura Bauernfeind with me. She's a Principal of Recreation and our Chief Forester. She's going to go over the procedure on our use of pesticides. And then we'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Laura Bauernfeind, Principal Grounds Maintenance Supervisor, Department of Recreation and Parks. First and foremost, it is the obligation of the City of Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks to uphold the tenet of the California Health and Safety Code to protect the public from potential health hazards. We are mandated by the County Environmental Health Bureau of Consumer Protection Vector Management Program. In the past, we have received letters from the Vector-Borne Disease Surveillance Unit for suppression of high populations of ground squirrels in various locations. If rodent populations are allowed to expand unabated, it is possible that potential health risks could occur. A major component of the State Vector-Borne Disease Section Charter is to monitor and control many of the risks from rodent-transmitted diseases, including hantavirus and bubonic plague. The public risks expand exponentially when rodent populations are left unabated. Recreation and Parks is committed and obligated to the health and safety of all of its patrons and employees, as well as to follow the legal mandates enforced by the State of California, Department of Pesticide Regulation, and Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. In addition, we are forced by local county agricultural commission weights and measures, making sure we are in compliance within local laws in all pesticide use. We only use the safest California registered products available, and only after all other options are evaluated, thresholds considered, and selected controls implemented. We at Recreation and Parks utilize an integrated pest management practice in dealing with all pest problems. Pesticides are only used as a treatment of last resort. Other possible control measures include the use of biological, mechanical, cultural, and habitat modification. These options have not always proven to be practical, considering the scope of our operations. Recreation and Parks primarily uses first-generation anticoagulant rodenticides, which require multiple feedings to work. This further safeguards against the off-target predatory issues we're discussing. These products break down quicker in the target of pests being controlled and reduce secondary toxicity. All rodenticide applications in city parks are made using secured and clearly labeled bait stations, this reducing the possibility of off-target ingestion. The department's Pest Management Division consists of trained professionals who carry California Department of Pesticide Regulation licenses and certificates and receive ongoing education and training to safely apply pesticides and to maintain their licenses on a 2-year cycle. These applicators are all working under the direct supervision of a California State Licensed Pest Control Advisor. Recreation and Parks' core mission is to maintain safe and healthy environments for its thousands of daily park visitors who use our parks for recreation, sports programs, picnicking, hiking, golfing, and horseback riding. Allowing rodent populations to go unabated is unfortunately contradictory to this goal.
Okay, thank you. And colleagues, Laura and Ramon, you're going to stick around right after the PowerPoint. So they're going to come back after the PowerPoint presentation by Ms. Serious, and we can ask questions then. That's what I would recommend.
Sure.
So we can get on. Yeah, so we can get on with the PowerPoint. Thank you. And so next, I'd like to invite Laurel E.K. Serious, an urban wildlife expert from the University of California, who is going to provide a PowerPoint presentation on the issue for us. Thank you so much for preparing this.
What's that? How do you pronounce your last name?
Serious. So thank you for having me. My name is Laurel Serious. I'm a wildlife biologist with UCLA, and I collaborate with the National Park Service. So I'm here to talk about our joint research studying the effects of anticoagulant rat poison exposure on urban carnivores in the Los Angeles area. But first, we would like to thank LA City Parks and Recreation for allowing us to study bobcats and mountain lion P22 on their grounds, and they have facilitated us learning more about this issue. So anticoagulant rodenticides, their mode of action is to deplete clotting factors in animals that ingest the poisons, and the result is that target species die by internal hemorrhage. They have a delayed onset of action where an animal that ingests a lethal dose may die up to 10 days later. There's 2 different classes of anticoagulant rodenticides that we've been talking about. The first generation compounds are less toxic and are warfarin, diphacinone, chlorphacinone, and cumachlor. There are second generation compounds that are much more toxic, and those include bromadiolone, rhodipicum, and diphethiolone. I'm going to show some data about our detection of these 2 different kinds of compounds. The second generation compounds will be marked with the red star to help you remember it more easily. So besides their toxicity, they have differences in their hepatic half-life. So for example, the first generation compound diphacinone has a half-life of 3 days in liver tissue in rats, compared with rhodipicum and bromadiolone that have half-lives that extend beyond 100 days in rats, which means that if an animal does not ingest a lethal dose, then it may carry those compounds in its tissue, in its liver tissue, for more than a year. So the result is, here we are, we're targeting these small mammal populations in and around our homes and in open areas, and the animals may not die immediately, or because of that delayed onset of action, predatory species have ample opportunity to be secondarily exposed to these poisons. And that's what we think is occurring for our predatory species in these ecosystems. And in the case of mountain lions, they may actually be tertiarily exposed, where they're consuming poisoned coyotes or raccoons, for example.
Yeah.
So jumping into the data that we have from the work that both the National Park Service and UCLA has done, we have found that we have studied coyotes, bobcats, and mountain lions, and greater than 80% of all 3 of these species are exposed to anticoagulants. Looking at coyotes, we see multiple exposure to multiple compounds, and those include rhodipicum, bromadiolone, and diphethiolone as the second-generation compounds, and then diphacinone and chlorphacinone as the first-generation compounds. And we found that Of all the animals tested, 38% were exposed to multiple compounds, which suggests multiple exposure events. And during a 9-year National Park Service study, anticoagulant rodenticide toxicity was the second leading cause of mortality. So jumping into bobcats, this is more my area of research, so I have a little bit more data to show for them. I apologize, the colors are not turning out well. But I have tested both blood and liver samples for bobcats. And the bars on the left represent blood samples that have been tested, whereas the bars on the right represent liver samples. So if we look at what compounds are we detecting in the liver, we see again rotificum, bromadiolone, diphacinone, and diphethiolone are the 4 most common compounds. Interestingly, if we look at blood and look specifically at diphacinone, the bar on the left, that is the most commonly detected compound in the blood, which because blood, the half-life of these compounds in blood is much shorter than in liver, this suggests that diphacinone is actually the most commonly encountered compounds by these predatory animals. So when we look at how many compounds are individuals being exposed to, for bobcats, what I have found is that animals are exposed to at least 3 compounds or more. So most often they're exposed to at least 3 compounds, which again suggests multiple exposure events and the possibility of chronic exposure in these animals. I also tested 2 fetal bobcats and found that they were already exposed to multiple anticoagulant compounds. One was already exposed to 5 different compounds. So this anticoagulant exposure can begin during prenatal development and persist for the duration of an animal's life. I have 2 different graphs here. The graph on top shows anticoagulant exposure detected over time in bobcats, and this is the quantity of compounds that we're detecting in these animals. And what we can see is that since 2001, animals have been being exposed to anticoagulants, but we can see that there's variation in the mean concentrations that we're detecting over time. The graph on the bottom represents the pounds of anticoagulants for those 4 common compounds that I've been describing, the pounds that are reported to the Department of Pesticide Regulation as applied in the counties. There's remarkable similarities in these graphs. So the quantity of compounds that we are putting into the environment mirrors the quantity of compounds that we are detecting in these animals. Some of my research is focused on what are the risk factors, how does bobcat proximity to urbanization influence their risk factor for exposure. And just briefly, I want to say there's 2 different kinds of land uses that are really high probability risk factors for bobcats. One of them is single-family, high-density residential areas. Although it comprises a small portion of the city area, less than 10%, it is highly associated with various anticoagulant measures, including exposure to diphacinone, that first-generation compound, as well as exposure to the second-generation compounds.
Professor, would you say that's the Santa Monica Mountains?
The study area is Santa Monica Mountains, yes.
No, would you say where that problem exists with single-family homes?
Yes, in the Santa
Santa
Monica.
Monica, even though there's there's much wilderness area behind many of those parcels.
Exactly. That's why I say it's a small percentage of our study area is the single-family, high-density residential areas, and yet bobcat proximity to those areas is the single biggest risk factor for exposure. The second biggest risk factor, even though it comprises less than 2% of the study area, is bobcat proximity to golf courses and other altered open areas like cemeteries or manicured parks. And we find that, again, despite it comprising less than 2% of the Santa Monica Mountains, or where we're studying these bobcats, it is associated with anticoagulant exposure in general, as well as exposure to those second-generation compounds, rotificum and bromadiolone. As mentioned earlier, we have found an association between the disease, notoedric mange, and exposure to anticoagulants, and specifically through our research, we think it's chronic exposure to anticoagulants increases bobcat susceptibility to mange. So, for example, bobcats that are exposed to 2 or more compounds are 7 times more likely to die of notoedric mange. Here's an example of a bobcat that I captured at the Hollywood Bowl in 2010. He was an older, healthy male. And 1 year later, people were sending me photos of this bobcat dying of notoedric mange. And It's hard to tell in the photos, but it has profound impacts on these animals.
Professor Serious, quick question. Does it matter which generation of anticoagulants are in combination?
Okay, so this is a very good question. So most of the testing we do, and to test for the association between mange and anticoagulants, is done using liver tissue. And because the second generation compounds have such long hepatic half-lives, we think that it's biased towards the second generation compounds. But overall, because they're being exposed to multiple compounds, there could be even interactive effects between those first generation and the second generation. So notometric mange is an ectoparasitic disease, and severe cases in wild and domestic animal populations are typically associated with an immune-compromised state. So in the case of the bobcats, what we hypothesize is that multiple and chronic exposure events are decreasing bobcat immunity and their ability to mount an anti-mite response when they're exposed to mange. Mange has had profound impacts on populations of bobcats across the Santa Monica Mountains, and for example, the National Park Service has had a long-term study in the Thousand Oaks area. They began their bobcat study in 1996, and from 1997 to 2001, the annual survival rate of radio-colored bobcats was greater than 75%. In 2002, mange entered the population, and the survival rate fell to less than 30%. So this disease is not isolated to P22 in Griffith Park or bobcats in Thousand Oaks. Here's a map of cases of mange across the Santa Monica Mountains. Again, sorry for the colors. The brown circles represent, or all these circles represent, sampling locations of bobcats during our long-term research. The gold circles and stars represent bobcats that have died of mange in the study area. This is more than 25% of the animals that we've sampled across the Santa Monicas. So jumping into our mountain lion data. So we have found exposure to multiple compounds in mountain lions as well, and these include those 4 most commonly detected compounds: rhodipicum, bromadiolone, diphacinone, which is a first-generation compound, and diphethiolone. And we have, during our long-term research, we have discovered 2 mountain lions to die directly from anticoagulant toxicity. Interestingly, those 2 mountain lions also had severe cases of mange. We think the same dynamic exists for mountain lions as what we see in the bobcats. We believe there is an association between mange and anticoagulants in mountain lions as well. And so that brings us to P22, who was sampled in Griffith Park. Recently, the National Park Service captured him, and we discovered that he had severe mange. We collected blood from him, we sent that off for testing, and we discovered 2 different first-generation anticoagulants in his blood, chlorphacinone and diphacinone, so multiple exposure events again. And undoubtedly, if we were able to sample his liver, we would detect second-generation compounds there as well. So pesticides are an important conservation problem in general. When we talk specifically about anticoagulant rodenticides, as with many pesticides, it's affecting multiple species. The National Park Service and UCLA has only studied 3 different species in terms of the effects of anticoagulants in those species, and we found all 3 are exposed and at high rates. We've documented mortality associated with these compounds. We believe there could be decreased reproduction rates associated with these compounds. Think about fetal bobcats who are already being exposed to these poisons. We have observed increased disease susceptibility associated with these poisons, and it's possible that there's increased susceptibility to other stressors. For example, we have evidence that recent exposure to anticoagulants increases the probability of bobcats being hit by cars. So when we combine all of these consequences of pesticides and specifically anticoagulant rodenticides, it can challenge even those urban adaptable wildlife species like coyotes and like bobcats and their ability to persist in the ecosystem, thus potentially threatening entire ecosystems. So in summary, we found greater than 80% of exposure in coyotes. It was the second leading, anticoagulant exposure is the second leading cause of death in a 9-year coyote study. 92% of bobcats are exposed. There was a significant association between mange and anticoagulant exposure. 11 of 12 mountain lions that have been tested were exposed, including a 3-month-old kitten. 2 mountain mountain lions have died directly of anticoagulant toxicity, and we have opportunistically documented death of other species as well, such as gray foxes that are very vulnerable to the effects of these compounds. And these are just the species that we've looked at. There's undoubtedly widespread exposure in other species as well, and I recently tested a gopher snake, actually, that I had collected a sample, and it died at the Hollywood Bowl, and it was also exposed to anticoagulants. So we're looking beyond mammals. Vertebrates in general are vulnerable to the effects of these poisons. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Serious. Really appreciate that. And if we could have Rec and Parks back up, please, that would be terrific.
We just ask any extra
Professor, if you could
testimony
stick
to-
Professor, if you could
Professor?
stick around as well, that would be terrific. Yes, please. Oh, please have a seat. Thank you. So I think that when the LA Times article came out about P22 a few weeks back, I, for one, was very depressed after reading this. It's tragic, and we know we have an issue, I want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Koretz and Mr. Labange, for this motion so that we can get to the bottom of this, so that we are not unnecessarily harming our environment unintentionally and on up the food chain. We are joined by our colleague, Curran Price. Mr. Price, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And with that, we'll take a few questions. One of the first questions I have to Rec and Parks, just a general question: what generation of anticoagulants? I cannot speak. After hearing you, I feel like such an amateur. Which generation of poisons, one or two, are in any kind of use anywhere in a Rec and Park system?
Primarily first generation, looking primarily at our efforts to control ground squirrel populations. Second generation rat poisons are used very infrequently, but we do periodically have to use them, especially when we're looking at infestations inside recreation centers, especially for the Norway rats and other things which are not readily controlled by snap traps and glue boards.
Does Rec and Parks have a policy on our regional parks, our naturalistic parks that don't necessarily fall within the regional parks? For example, we have Griffith Park, we have Elysian Park, we have the Lake Machado area, Hanson Dam area, and then we have amenities like the Silver Lake Meadow. Are there any Generation 2 poisons used at any of these locations that have, more often than not, an abundance of predator animals? Birds, coyotes, the occasional mountain lion?
Not necessarily in the open space areas or the undeveloped areas. The only place in those types of facilities where we might have to resort to second generation would be someplace like a developed area, a building or a structure where the public was coming frequently.
Mm-hmm. And a question to you, Professor. You mentioned that the percentage shot way up back in 2002 in terms of death from mange,
Yes.
and which is widely believed to be the result of the poisoning. Why that year all of a sudden?
Okay, so what we believe is that is the year that mange entered the population. So bobcats in general and felids in general are very tolerant to the effects of anticoagulants, and so they're able to tolerate that sublethal chronic exposure. And there's not a lot known about the mite, but we believe that it just happens to be the year that the mite was introduced to the population, potentially from spillover from domestic cats to bobcats. And this is a case where we believe chronic exposure increases their susceptibility to other stressors, and in this case, it was mange.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So since mange, so I get it. The immune system's low, the mange mites appear, and they proliferate easily.
Correct.
Because the immune systems are compromised.
Correct.
In the wildlife. Okay, I'm going to have several more questions and comments, but I'd like to open it up to my colleagues.
You want to see it?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
You don't want to see it? Yeah, no.
Mr.
All right,
LaBarge?
just a couple of questions from the park standpoint here. I'm a daily, since 1978, hiker in Griffith Park, and I've seen less deer. Does that mean the mountain lion is eating the deer?
Oh, is this for me?
Whoever the expert
Okay,
is.
well, we know, I have been to kill sites. We know that the mountain lion is definitely eating deer. It's the primary diet of mountain lions in California are mule deer. So yes, he is consuming deer. He's also consuming coyotes and raccoons that we've documented consume.
Right. I've also seen a high number of coyotes more in packs this year. There's 8 that every morning are down in the near the Greek Theater, and then they come right up, and they're not afraid of anybody, and they kind of do their thing. And then on a Saturday, I heard a vicious kill where I think they got a deer up the bird sanctuary trail off to there. It was very ugly sound to hear them wail as they destroyed a deer, because there's so few deer. But the issue I want to ask more to you, Professor, is rats. Someone said an eastern city did not have a plan, and the rats overran the eastern city. Have you heard it? I don't know if it was New York City or one large metropolitan. You know anything about any urban rats in urban areas, in the developed area, not in the natural area?
I am not an expert on rodents in urban areas.
Got it. But if we don't control rodents, could we have a problem in the population?
I think that there's alternatives to anticoagulants for control. And again, my specialty...
That's what I want to hear about. What can we do? What are the alternatives?
There's going to be people that are going to be presenting alternatives. But I think an important thing to do is to try to prevent infestation to begin with. And in terms of in those residential areas where it's a big problem and people are putting out those poisons, a first step could be just closing up holes. And again, my specialty is research. I'm a biologist that studies carnivores, and so I don't think I'm the right person to ask about exact alternatives to this problem.
Very good. I just think it's something that we have to be cautious of. I know sometimes, the last time I know of a human being bitten by a coyote was in the merry-go-round area, maybe 15 years ago, and we had to hire specialists from Riverside County who had to take the coyotes out, because once they bit, they thought they'd bite again. It was a 15-month-old child near the merry-go-round, and just came up on that. I do have concerns, though, and working with the National Park Services on the mountain lion, especially the protocols, because the mountain lion is now coming further south of the park, and we want to know what is safe for the public in how we interact with the mountain lion, and also the other people. The information I got, Mr. Chairman, is you call California Fish and Game. California Fish and Game may not have as fastest response as the local police agency or the local rangers, and what their protocols are. And what's the ranger's protocol when a mountain lion's out there south of the natural area?
I think I'm not sure what the protocol is.
Got it.
They're supposed to kind of like let them go back to...
Yeah, but what if they keep going down to Hollywood Boulevard? Like they want to go over to Pink's?
Can't buy them a hot dog, but...
No, they don't need to pay that. I just think there's some concerns that we have, because it's real important how everybody cohabitates with that in the proper protocols on this.
So are you suggesting that it's good to use poisons to control our predator?
Professor, I find that shocking that you would think that.
I'm sorry. I'm
teasing you. Never done ever question a professor in my life. I had one chance in a million, and this was the moment when I could do that. No, I want to know what's the answer. That's the key, and I think Mr. Koretz, who had to continue his business, has brought up a tremendous point. That's why I second it. If there's alternatives, it's very important. But I do want to think about the public health issue and also the issue of public safety, and as we all are so closely intertwined in this. It is a dynamic change. The biggest change in Los Angeles, I truly believe, as far as coyotes has been, is containerized trash collection, where before coyotes could freely knock over a metal can and scavenge. Now these are big, sturdy cans they can't get to. They're looking for different sources. The water system is very dry. All the leaks, they got to fix leaks within 24 hours, so they get called on it. So there's the natural area that used to be there is not as often available. So I want to find the right answer so we can go forward and be the most humane and live with cohabitation. And there's nothing like seeing a deer in Griffith Park, though. I'll tell you, there's nothing like that? I only saw P22 once, and he was a little further away, but
Well, I would
What?
just like to add that prophylactic measures like that to help prevent coyote infestation into the trash could also help prevent infestation by rodents.
Right.
And closing up water sources, that's also important to help prevent infestation with rodents. So those measures are helping to control that problem as well.
thank you.
Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think and thank you, Professor. It's always great to see a fine Bruin give a great presentation. You know what? I think what we're trying to find here is a happy balance. A balance where we're addressing the rodent population, but at the same time not impacting animals like P22. So my question is, where is that happy balance? You know, if we do traps, you'll be out here saying that trapping rodents is inhumane.
I would not be saying that personally.
So-
I think that mechanical measures are much more humane than widespread poisoning of a lot of wildlife and leading to death in bobcats by mange. Mechanical traps are far more humane where it's affecting a single species rather than an entire ecosystem.
And by listening to that, Rec and Parks, how do you feel about using mechanical traps?
Go ahead. Well, it's kind of like a safety issue for rec and parks because of most of our parks are open to all the community. So whenever we trap gophers, for instance, we have to remove the trap within 2 hours after we set it because we can't leave it there unattended. Somebody might come by and pull it or step on it and hurt themselves. And then so because of the community visiting our parks, it's kind of like a safety issue to leave it unattended.
So how is that different than a child going into a one of those? I think I just saw one laying around here.
And they do.
Can I see that, please?
Oh, good move, Joe. You got it tonight.
How is a mechanical trap different than a child digging his or her hand into this and looking for the prize? That is, how is it different?
Some of the mechanical traps that, for instance, for gopher, it's actually it's a trap where you step on it, there's a trigger on it and there's clamp. It pokes right through it traps the gopher or it pokes right through the belly of the gopher. So it's actually something that you could set. It's like a mouse trap. You could set it, but it actually has these two pointy ends and they close together, so it would capture the.
And there's no concern of a child reaching in for the poison on this type of contraption?
Of course there's concern. Anytime we use bait stations, they're clearly labeled, they're clearly secured, and they're put in as discrete locations as possible. You're not going to find this, next to a children's play area or someplace where the public could readily assess it. We take great lengths to try and put them very discreetly and away
Whereas the
from...
mechanical traps are different as far as the placement of mechanical traps.
Mechanical traps for gophers have to get put into the runs, which are in open spaces. Mechanical traps for rats and mice and other things are typically put in dark little crevices and corners inside structures where the public's not going to get to them. We're not going to set a mouse trap or a rat trap on the baseboards of a gymnasium. They're going to be in a pipe chase or someplace away from the public.
So from what I hear, there are opportunities to do both.
We utilize all available measures.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Price.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for testifying. I came in a little late, but I'm just kind of curious. Is there any way we can beef up our education or information programs around these issues, or is it just kind of a matter of professionals doing what they do? I mean, how do we engage the public anymore, making them more aware, or making them
You got one of these?
partners with us in this process?
Your region, San Pedro.
That's a good question. I think something that's worthy of note is that the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, effective July the 1st, has put into place a motion to ban the availability of most second-generation rodenticides to the general public. You're not going to be able to walk into Home Depot or Lowe's and buy a box of Decon. It's only going to be available for registered professionals to use and apply. It's coming off the shelf and won't longer be available to the general Bob the homeowner.
But no other information campaigns, education campaigns about these pesticides, the use of them, or not being near them, or...
Is this a question for me as well? or-
Anyone that can answer.
Well, I personally have created a website, which is maybe not as broad as you're looking for, but I have created a website to provide information about our research and the dangers of the poisons, and this is helping inform groups that have been active in increasing education in local cities like Malibu and Calabasas to help educate the cities and lead to reduced use in those cities. So that's one measure. The National Park Service has been implementing education programs. They have outreach programs. They have their visitor center where they display information about the poisons. So we are trying to educate, but it's a big issue. And the comment about the change in the availability of the second-generation compounds, that is true that it's not going to be available at Home Depot, but people are still going to be able to call a local pest control agency and have it put in their backyard. So it isn't going to completely resolve the issue. And so education, increased education, is very needed.
I agree, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. And Laura, you mentioned most second-generation poisons will be prohibited for sale over the counter by July 1. How come not all?
That's a question for the Department of Pesticide Regulation. This is a California ban that's coming in. I don't know the particulars behind why they chose what they chose.
So it's a state ban that's coming in?
Correct.
And to everyone's knowledge, could we act more comprehensively locally? Or perhaps by the city or county?
By the county county ag commissioner or vector control.
County Ag is our local enforcement agency. They are obviously obliged to follow the regulations. They're the local enforcement agent for the Department of Pesticide Regulation.
And in terms of with this new law coming into effect on July 1, how will city recreation and parks, how will we, what changes are we making? Are we going to stop using second generation entirely?
The Department of Pesticide Regulation ban that's in place July 1 makes it a restricted material, which means it's only available for use by registered and licensed professionals, which would include the Department of Recreation and Parks. The only real other change is that the baits have to be used within 50 feet of a structure, so a pesticide applicator couldn't throw it down the hillside hundreds of feet behind the structure. Our current policies with second generation are consistent with that anyways. We don't apply anything outside of a structure, even in our current operations with second generation.
In relation to gophers, we have gopher issues in so many of our parks, and I'm aware of that. What kinds of poisons do you use? The type of poisons where they?
We're not using baits for gophers. They haven't proven to be effective. So it's primarily mechanical gopher traps that Mr. Barajas was explaining, and periodically we will make something called a fumitoxin application, but that requires the park to be closed at the time. Fenced. It's a small tablet that is put into the burrows, and it's closed, and moisture in the soil activates a gas that instantly kills the gopher. There is no poison stored in the adipose tissue of the gopher, so if a dog or a raptor or somebody were to dig that gopher up, there's no danger of secondary poisoning from that particular product.
Do we use glue traps?
Absolutely. For rats and mice.
For rats and mice only. Do we use them for gophers anywhere?
No. We use mechanical traps. I'm not aware of glue boards being effective for gophers.
Okay, so glue traps for rats and mice only in our facilities, but not out in
open spaces. But we're not necessarily treating for rats and mice in open space parks. That's part of the ecosystem. The only rodent that we're primarily concerned with in the open space parks are the ground squirrels, and that's because county health is concerned about their ability to spread plague.
So what is your approach to the big parks? What is your approach for rodent control at Griffith Park, for example?
For ground squirrels or for?
Yeah, in general.
We monitor populations. When thresholds get to a point where they're getting excessive, or we're getting complaints that there are mice in the concession stand at the pony ride, we follow up, do an investigation, look at exclusionary measures, look at trapping, and other things. Pesticides are only used as a measure of last resort. We do have bait stations in place in Griffith Park for ground squirrels, which periodically, depending on the season and monitoring the populations, we do have to take advantage of, and we do have to put rodenticides in them.
And with that, are those only first-generation poisons?
Yes.
Virtually no second-generation poisons in the parks for
ground squirrels.
For ground squirrels?
Correct.
But some are used for rats and mice?
Some second-generation poisons are used for rats and mice, but only as a measure of absolute last resort.
Would Rec and Parks consider halting using second-generation poisons entirely?
Yeah, well,
everywhere?
Well, we would consider, as long as it was, it wasn't a health issue for the rest of the community. Like she was saying, we only use them inside buildings. So
right.
So we would, we're open to, to changes.
But just on the off chance, or maybe not so off chance, that a rodent ingests the poison and then leaves the facility and then gets picked up by a coyote or a bobcat or an owl or a raptor or a blue heron or any number of animals that might swoop down.
We will, changes, if there's changes, suggestions, or anything that could be done better, we're open to it.
I'm going to suggest a report back on that for sure. And so what I'd like to just say is, I would love to just bust this wide open, because really what we're in an era where sustainability is the name of the game. Sustainability so that there's a balance, especially in our wildlife areas, where there's a balance of animals that prey on other animals, so that might be a much healthier way to approach our ecosystems, as fragile as they are, and really begin to de-emphasize the use of poisons, especially in all of our naturalistic areas, whether it's nearly 5,000 acre Griffith Park or 10 acre Silver Lake Meadow, wherever it may be. That to me would be a great approach to take a look holistically at what it would look like to completely revamp the way we control pests, squirrels, and rodents, and everything else, because along the river and all of our parks, there's just there's a 21st century way of thinking about reaching sustainability and ecosystem restoration and health. And so I would just encourage the department to think about that, and maybe we work together on that and start generate reports on what that would look like, just based on P22, so that he can have a legacy of making real change across the city. Okay. And so I would love that thought. So before we
Could I just
get into the
what you
proposals,
said there? I
sure.
think that's a very good point, which I support. But I think in urban areas, in developed areas, Trinity, Rec Center, all the places where there's built environment, not a large-scale area, you could be able to deal with things differently. You're the administrator, you're responsible. They're going to call you, Laura, if there's a problem at Normandy Playground, if there's a problem, at Pan Pacific, there's a problem at Elysian Valley. But in the big parks, is that what you want to focus on?
So there's the urban approach where there are rats and mice in a building.
Belvedere Park.
And there's the open area ecosystem approach, which I think need to be looked at very, very differently.
I agreed.
That's what you want, though.
Agreed.
That's what I want you to do. Okay, good.
Terrific, wonderful. All right. With that, we have several comment cards. Thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Everyone's busy, and we have to come and go sometimes. We have several comment cards. I want to thank all of you so much, and perhaps a question or two might come up based on the comments that we're about to hear. So if you wouldn't mind sticking around, that would be terrific. And I want to thank you for your report. And then we're going to make some recommendations at the end. Yeah, thank you so much. Our first card is, we have Wendy Dunn, followed by Skip
Got to
Haynes.
vacate the seats.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Followed by Skip Haynes, followed by Jennifer Tate. If you could all three come up, that would be terrific. And the next three will be Joel Schulman, Cassandra Barrera, thank you, and Bonnie McFarland will be after that. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Dunn, and I am a citizen of Malibu who was asked to work with the Malibu Parks and Rec staff. We formed a coalition as a result of the invitation from the City of Malibu Parks and Rec Department to address the environmental issues. Our initial focus is to inform the public about the misuse of rodenticides, herbicides, and pesticides and suggest alternatives. Our aim is a poison-free Santa Monica Mountains. It is imperative that we address the issue and the use of poisons throughout the ecosystem and watershed. The poisons we use do not just affect the target, but in reality affect every one of us along with the wildlife that resides in these beautiful mountains that surround us and the watershed that encompasses us. I urge the LA City Council to work with the city staff, reach out to the public, and create integrative pest management plans for the surrounding cities. The new rodenticide-free IPM in Malibu that began 6 months ago is successful, and because of this successful new model, we have begun to work with our neighboring cities to reach an overall goal as well. I would like to add that there are several cities surrounding the Santa Monica Mountains that are, creating new integrative pest management plans that do call for not using rodenticides. There are alternatives. The City of Malibu has been working with us. They've created a brochure we hand out to the public. The City of Calabasas has also done that. So again, I urge the council members to work with the city staff here and for public outreach. I agree with Mr. Price. There is plenty of public outreach. We are also working with people that we say no poison is safe. You clean up, you seal up, and you trap up. We give brochures that show bait boxes are not necessary. You can use owl boxes. You can use raptor poles. You can clean up, but we have to get rid of these bait boxes. They are killing our wildlife.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have so many speakers. We have to really keep it tight here. Skip?
Hi, can we pass these out? These are, just so you can see this, I'm Skip Haynes. I'm on the Board of Directors of Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife. We are leading, we're the only organization in Los Angeles that advocates across the board for wildlife. I'm sending you this. These are animals that have died from secondary rodenticide poisonings in our communities within the last 4 months. This is a very small sampling. People come to us. We are not rehabbers, but they think we are. This is what's happening in the community. The things that haven't been mentioned are we cannot get figures on how many pets have been poisoned. We cannot get accurate figures on how many children have been poisoned by these. These rodenticides taste like peanut butter and they look like candy. Kids love them. We and Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife are pushing for a total ban on these rodenticides. We do publicity. One of our mission statements for Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife is to publicize issues such as this. So we'd be happy to work with the city to do an outreach publicity program. We're already working with Animal Services to do one for the RACO program. So we'd be happy to talk with you about this. Also, I have just heard about it's not a poison. It's something that works on the digestive system of rats and mice only. And it's as bad as anticoagulant rodenticides. I mean, that's a horrible way to kill animals. But it's something that does not have any collateral damage. A human being can eat it. We are researching that now to see if this is a fact. If it is, it's something that could be an interim measure that can be used by the city, and it spreads the same as anticoagulants. It's pellets and so forth. So we'd be happy to give that information. One other thing I wanted to say is the argument that always comes up with anticoagulant rodenticides is bubonic plague and hantavirus. Coyotes are the first defense against these because coyotes are immune to plague and hantavirus. You don't get plague from fleas from coyotes. You get plague from fleas from rats. So when you kill coyotes, you are killing your first natural line of defense. So I just wanted to put that in. We wanted to thank you, Councilmember Labange and O'Farrell, and of course Mr. Koretz and Mr. Kern, who we haven't met yet. This is something we think Los Angeles should be the first city in the United States to ban these rodenticides flat out. The rest of the country will follow us. Los Angeles has the largest park system in the world going directly through the center of our city, and we owe it to the city. So
Thank you, Skip.
thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Tate.
Hi, I'm Jen Tate, and I'm here today on behalf of the Humane Society of the United States in support of item 13-1580. I volunteered for the job because I hike every day in Griffith Park, and I find the coyotes with mange pretty tragic. I see a lot of them, so I'm with you. We support a ban on the use of second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides in LA's parks and environmentally sensitive areas because these poisons pose major threats to California's wildlife. In fact, the threat these rodent poisons pose to wildlife has reached alarming proportions. Documented victims include 44 rare Pacific fishers, a candidate for endangered status, and 72 San Joaquin kit foxes, which are endangered. Raptors are the most frequently documented victims. 159 are reported, including hawks, owls, eagles, and vultures. Many thousands of other exposed wild animals die without documentation, since it's rare that wild animal victims are recovered and tests performed. As discussed, research strongly suggests that mountain lions and bobcats are dying because they're eating prey species who've ingested these poisons. This depresses the predators' immune systems, making them much more vulnerable to parasitic infections. Prohibiting the use of these poisons complements a new California regulation designated anticoagulant rodenticides as restricted materials. There are also laws pending that would prohibit the use of these materials in all of California's environmentally sensitive areas. That bill, AB 2657, by Assemblyman Richard Bloom, has passed the Assembly's Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee and will be heard by the Water, Parks, and Wildlife Committee tomorrow. Effective and humane alternatives to the use of these poisons do exist. California has been a leader in the field of integrated pest management, or IPM. Modern IPM approaches would limit the use of poisons and apply holistic management concepts, thus preserving the native predators who would help to limit rodent population growth. Please support item 13-1580 and advance it to a vote of the full council. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have 10 more speakers and we have 2 more agenda items. It's going to be a long meeting, so is there a way to do a minute and a half?
We could
You do a minute, and if you need more, then you
Okay,
get...
let's do a minute. I'm sorry, so just be thinking, and we're really getting the point. I have a feeling I know where all these comments are going as well, so it's encouraging, but let's try to do 60 seconds. I apologize. We have Joel Schumann, Cassandra Barrera, and Bonnie McFarland.
Thank you very much for taking care of the eastern end of the Santa Monica Mountains. I'm a part of Poison Free Malibu. We've been trying to deal with the western end. We've made a lot of progress starting in Malibu. They took the initiative to pass a resolution opposing rodenticides. And since then, we're trying to surround the mountains. We've got Nagura Hills, Calabasas, Hidden Hills, Westlake Village, Moore Park, and Ojai to pass similar resolutions where it's the same thing. The city does not use anticoagulant rodenticides anymore. Some of them already abandoned it several years before. I should give them credit for that. Okay, something some people have not said.
Unincorporated county, too?
Just going to say that. Okay. Yeah, my next sentence, listen. Okay, Zev Yaroslavsky land, one of his number one priority for the last year of his term was to take care of the unincorporated part of the Santa Monica Mountains in the coastal zone and outside, but I'm talking about the coastal zone. A provision in that plan, which was passed on April 10th by the Coastal Commission, having already been passed by LA County, completely and totally bans anticoagulant rodenticides, first and second generation, period. They cannot exist in that territory because of the problems we're hearing today.
Thank you.
So, Cassandra Barrera, and I'm president of Laurel Canyon Association, and we support all efforts to ban all generations of rodenticide. It not only sentences a string of wildlife to prolonged suffering, but it also sentences others further down the food chain to this inhumane death. It's a real gift that keeps on giving, that lives on after the original goal is met, and because these contained poisons live on, I'm sorry, we can put them in a building, but if it lives for 3 months, then that's a little ridiculous. So that's a sentence that is continuing on down the line, with tremendous consequences to the wildlife as well as the potential health hazard to our ecosystem. And worse, it disrupts the natural cycle of the predatory urban animal. Rodenticide belongs to a long list of new wondrous pesticides that have been introduced, but just because they are introduced doesn't mean they need to be used, as with DDT and malathion. Just because it's an effective tool doesn't need to be implemented. There are dangers and consequences, viable, humane alternatives, and as P2 was indicated as a native, I was extremely saddened by that because it's only the tip of the iceberg. It's getting rampant and it's growing. So you have the chance to prevent this from happening. There are no unintended consequences. There's no negative consequences. Only a win-win for the community, the wildlife, and the ecology. So thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you. Thank you. Bonnie McFarland.
Hi. Myself, Bonnie, and Scott Logan, we operate a nature store called Wild Wings in Sherman Oaks, and we specialize in wild bird supplies. We've actually installed 3 barn owl boxes on behalf of San Fernando Valley Audubon, and many more on behalf of our customers, specifically for rodent control. These boxes are protective nesting sites for barn owls. We are also poised to install 3 more in and around the Sepulveda Basin. It's believed that a barn owl can consume over 1,000 rats, mice, and gophers a year. A family could consume over 25 rodents a night. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife determined barn owls are economically beneficial wildlife species, one of the most in North America. Because they're raising multiple broods, they can provide year-round rodent control. We're concerned, of course, because we're putting up these barn owl boxes. We don't want to be poisoning the barn owls that, we're trying to protect. But it was stated earlier by Parks and Rec that they did not have any anticoagulants in and around protective areas. And in the Sepulveda Basin, we can send you an email of a picture of one of these rat traps in Haskell Creek, right near the wildlife preserve for birds. It's still there right now. So that's simply not true. There are picnic and other areas for the public right adjacent to the wildlife area. So they are, they do exist side by side, but there are many species of predatory birds, herons, hawks, owls, that can all consume those rats and do on a daily basis. We're extremely concerned. And
Okay, Bonnie, wrap it up, please.
We just hope that you guys can ban the use of these. And
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, and thanks for coming in and testifying. Next, we're going to have Janny Carper, Jerry Hans, and Tony Tucci. Thank you.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Janet Carper. I'm a member of CLAW, but I'm reading a letter on behalf of the National Museum of Animals and Society, whose mission is dedicated to enriching the lives of the animals and people through exploration of our shared experience. To paraphrase then, the issue regarding rodenticide use in the city parks greatly alarms us, whether by losing the wildlife we admire, the dogs and cats we treat as family, or even our youngsters who accidentally come into contact with such poisons. On behalf of our more than 7,000 supporters, we strongly encourage the Los Angeles City Council and the Department of Recreation and Parks and other city departments to ban the use of poisons to control the rodent population in the parks and hillside areas of Los Angeles, including Santa Monica Mountains, Hollywood Hills, and Griffith Park. Personally, I would also like to say, while I understand that often new policies have to be implemented in stages, and therefore you seem to be concentrating on ecologically sensitive areas, I would like you to please consider the market pressure and the signal that it would send to companies such as Reckitt Benckiser, which the EPA is currently trying to deal with, because it sends a signal that this is just not acceptable. And please remember the half-life of this poison that can go on for 130 days. And I don't think anyone radio collars rats to see how far they go once they've consumed inside a building, and it can go to cats and other personal entities, not just wild animals. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Carper.
Jerry Hans, president of Friends of Griffith Park. I have a two articles to pass around there. Obviously, we support the banning of the secondary rodenticides, and would also like to encourage the department to use the first-generation products very discreetly. We think things need to go much further, though, and glad about the state pest regulations going into effect, but also pest control companies need to be better regulated. Lots of credit, though, goes to our scientific community, including Seth Riley at National Park Service and Laurel, who spoke, Cooper Ecological, and many more. This is not new stuff. The reality has been staring us in the face for a long time. In early 2010, Laurel brought this problem to the attention of many Griffith Park advocates. And because of that, when shortly after that, when Friends of Griffith Park was formed, it became a priority. So you can see the articles that we've written on the problem, and we've distributed those newsletters to 10,000 residents around Griffith Park. I'd also like to emphasize the need for primary control. And what I mean is parks, the department needs to better control garbage and much stricter enforcement of illegal wildlife feeding. And I see both of those problems all the time in Griffith Park. So what this means is more budget for maintenance and more budget for park rangers. So we'll see you at the budget hearings.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. Tony.
Hello, my name is Tony Tucci from Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife, and I'd like to speak specifically to the, and push the committee here a little bit harder to think about dealing with the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. The Assembly bill is coming forward, and they're identifying, I think that we should adopt regulations now to formalize it, that they're going to push for these sensitive areas. We know what the sensitive areas are in our neighborhoods, so we should deal with that. Now, the second part of watching Laurel's presentation is difascinone. You know, I looked at that and I saw that the bobcats in Griffith Park on that were healthy, but P22 is in showing the blood work of P22, we're able to see that that is not the case. So, as Klaus said, a ban is where we need to go, and we thank you guys for knowing that, we're not here wanting the rodent population to go unabated. We just want our city and our residents to work a little bit harder on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we're going to have Allison Samard, my apologies, Patty Shankar, and Shri Shankar.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Farrell, and we've worked with you as well as Councilmember Corretz and Councilmember Labange on this, and we were very pleased when you passed this motion. Sort of like the motion you passed last week also on wildlife corridors. It's all related, and this is what CLAW has been working on from the beginning. We understand that the health of our wildlife are the barometer of the health of our environment and the health of our children. Our pets and children, more than 10,000 children every year under the age of 6 are accidentally poisoned by anticoagulant rodenticide. So this is a serious issue. We're seeing it in the hillsides. It's raining raptors. Skip got up and showed you photos. While these measurements are extremely important, raptors are the solution. Are also finding that that's the problem. One of the issues that we are also looking at is the gestation rate of a rat is obviously very quick. The gestation rate of mammals, et cetera, is much longer. If they are dying because of secondary rodenticide, that is the very tool that you need to get rid of rats. So this is becoming only worse, and it's getting an exponential problem. So we, of course, as CLAW has mentioned, we are supporting a full ban and appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. I think Patty is not here, but we have Shri Shankar.
Yes. Hi. I think that this is such a perfect timing for this issue. I mean, all of us saw the pictures of P22, the mountain lion that we all got to see those beautiful pictures of in the Hollywood Hills, and it's just, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. I keep hearing words like bubonic plague, and, we haven't had the plague for over 100 years. I think we're doing things a lot differently as far as sanitation and how we keep our garbage. I don't know that the bubonic plague is something to, has as a top concern, and to, give permission to continue the use of rodenticide. I think it's alarming that 80% of mountain lions, bobcats, and coyotes are being impacted by these poisons, and just for the sake of those animals, I think we really need to get rid of these rodenticides and use other alternatives that have been suggested. Thank you.
Thanks, Cherie. And next we have Miguel Ordeñana, Carrie Lovelace Carrier, and those are our final speakers.
I'm Miguel Ordeñana. I'm a wildlife biologist, and I also grew up right outside Griffith Park, and I had the fortune of discovering P22 and was probably one of the first to document his declining health. And I've also documented the Hollywood bobcat that you guys saw and his declining health till he died. And as a person, and I also write blogs and do education as much as I can about these issues to the general public on Laurel's website. And that's an important thing. I didn't know we had deer in Griffith Park till I was an adult. I didn't know about bobcats till I was a professional working in the field in Griffith Park. And I just want to drive home that point that everything is connected. These bobcats are in people's backyards, coyotes as well. And I found a bobcat in Debs Park, which is a much smaller park than Griffith Park, just a few months ago. And this is the first knowledge of this. And I just want to remind you guys that these are elusive species that professionals are even having trouble studying. We have to use remotely triggered cameras. We have to trap them. We have to do special things. So going out on a hike and making an assessment based on that is not an efficient way of guiding management. And I want to make sure you guys know that there's gray foxes in the Baldwin Hills, and my team has 40-plus cameras in Griffith Park, cameras that are going to go up in Baldwin Hills pretty soon. And we're going to continue to monitor these things, and I hope you guys use us as partners in this, and so we can help these species, and so future generations like myself not only know that these animals are in the area, but know how to take care of them much better than I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel.
Hey, just a question. Are your cameras approved by Record Parks?
Yes, sir.
Okay, did they know where they are?
Yes, they do.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Miguel, thanks for your work, and we will absolutely rely on your expertise. Thank you. Carrie, thank you.
Hi, I'm Carrie Lovelace Carrier of the Topanga Creek Watershed Committee. In addition to reiterating everything that all my amazing environmental colleagues have said today, I just wanted to quickly point out something that somebody said about bubonic plague. While it was certainly a scourge in the 14th century, it can be cured today with a standard course of antibiotics, so it should not be held up as any sort of pretext for why we should continue the use of very toxic poisons. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think Ramon and Laura, if you could come up one more time, we're going to make a few recommendations. To sort of continue where we were going before the public comment, I would like to recommend that Rec and Parks report back on the feasibility of a few things. One, eliminating all rodenticides, what that would look like. Just report back on that. Wherever, across all park systems in Los Angeles. And two, report back on what it would look like to ban all second-generation rodenticides everywhere. And third, report back on what it would look like to ban all rodenticides in our regional parks and wildlife areas, so-called natural parks. There's Vista Hermosa, there's the Silver Lake Meadow, in addition to the Griffith Parks of the world. So banning all rodenticides in those parks, period, but keeping first-generation rodenticides in our urban parks and rec centers, what that would look like. So you're reporting back on a menu of these three possibilities. That's what I'd like to ask for. And
just for some of the public comment, Madam CLA, if you could ask that the Bureau of Sanitation report on all dead animals in the Santa Monica Mountains, because most dead animals are taken to a rendering plant, and there should be some tracking of that, so that information could be done as well. And then the other thing, too, on the issues of the parks, DWP is a department on its own. It's a proprietary department. They have large open spaces.
True.
Could you meet with DWP to see how they manage? Because there's a lot of wildlife inside Silver Lake. That's why I want to keep it passive as opposed to active, because there's a wildlife. Anybody see the Canadians in Griffith Park? Not in Griffith Park, but in Silver Lake. Anybody see them? They fly between Canada and Mexico, and there's all the Canadian geese, hundreds and thousands of them.
I've seen a few Canadians there, too.
I know. So I'm pro-immigrant, so I just wanted to let you know. So, no, but I think those things with water and power, because they have large parcels that do, and they have different protocol for their, whether it's an active open reservoir or whatever it may be. So I think that would be good to follow up with them, but especially with sanitation with water and power. And I want to ask Allison just to come up one more time, just so, if you could, please. Allison, right? Yeah. Just say rats one time for me.
Rats?
Yeah, just say it like you said it.
What did I say, like New Yorker?
Yeah, you said it like Jimmy Cagney, and I just wanted to, yeah. You dirty rat. So,
You dirty rat?
you got it.
Right. Thank you.
All right, so, thank you.
Thank you, Rec and Parks, for your report. Thank you so much. And Laura, I just got to take a moment to commend you on Silver Lake Meadow. That was your project, and it came out beautifully, so you also deserve an accolade for that.
And an accolade for the tree removal. They were all the dead trees, fire hazard on Vermont Canyon, and you're going after the Greek Theater, and we got to get them out of the bird sanctuary at the appropriate time. Thank you.
The Parks and Rec working with the city council, directing the Parks and Rec to work with citizens. We did that in Malibu, and what we're
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, no, we have to keep the structure of the meeting, but that's a given. So let's just get the report back. So we have park advisory boards and Rec and Parks interacting with communities around all our parks on a regular basis, but that's a good point, so I appreciate that. And I want to thank everyone for coming in from far-flung places just to come to City Hall to testify. That's not lost on us, so thanks for taking the time to do that.
And for those who came from far-flung places like Malibu, if you've not been to the top, the Tom Bradley Tower, take another 10 minutes. It's a 2-minute ride. It's worth it. Look, a great open observation deck. It'll make you feel good about Los Angeles.
Mr. Chair, will we be holding this in committee pending the report backs?
Holding it committee, pending report back in 30 days.
30
Thank
days.
you.
30 days. Budget time.
Thank you. I know, it's sad. All right, we do have 2 items, 10 and 11.
It'll be quick.
And they'll be very quick. We'll be real quick.
It'll be the last one to know.
We have no compromise.
Which item is this? Which item?
Oh, 10 and 11.
Yeah.
She's running.
Yes.
Item number 10, motion Labange O'Farrell relative to instructing the Department of Recreation and Parks to make a thorough assessment and report back to the Arts, Parks, Health, Aging, and River Committee on the overall status of the Griffith Park water system within 45 days. Item 11, LADWP to report response to motion Labange O'Farrell relative to the status of recycled water projects in Griffith Park, including an update of the Griffith Park South Water Recycling Project.
Thank you. I know we have Mr. Gibson here.
That's right. Hi, Tom Gibson, Recreation and Parks, landscape architect. We're talking about the irrigation systems in Griffith Park. First, the good news is that we have many areas that have been are in new or good working condition. This includes Betty Davis Picnic Area, which was recently redone, Pecan Grove, Ferraro Fields, Wilson and Harding Golf Courses, Crystal Springs, Park Center, Old Zoo, Tregnan Golf, North Atwater Park, Los Feliz 9-hole golf course, which was just being finished, Friendship Auditorium, Observatory Landscaping, Roosevelt Golf, Ferndale Entry Landscaping, Bronson area, and Lake Hollywood Park. The maps that Laura is holding shows the areas of the park that still have galvanized pipe and are manually operated. All those purple areas are still like old systems. So the department plans to retrofit the following park areas and convert to recycled water within the next 2 years. These parks, the Griffith Park entry at Los Feliz Boulevard, Griffith Park Rec Center area, the Bond area across the street from Los Feliz Golf Course, Central Service Yard around the Administration Building, the Lippincott.
Actually, there's no reclaimed water at Central Service Yard right now?
But it's a part of the North Atwater project, so the pipeline is coming right down Chevy Chase.
But you're right next to the reclaimed plant. I mean, you're right now, you should...
It will be in a second.
No, but I mean, you could use it, I'm just... Yeah, you learn every day, Tom. I'm not blaming you or anybody,
No.
but the reclaim part of sanitation is right next to CSY, Central Service Yard. So is there not a hookup for your guys to use?
Not currently. That's what we want to do in this summer, basically.
We'll do it this summer.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Mix, that's your district. You could be a hero.
That's right. Okay.
Okay.
So
50 feet, right.
So also Lippincott area along Zoo Drive, and then the SETA area. Then also we're hoping to do Travel Town, and then perhaps also for dust control purposes get Martinez Arena.
Okay, all those are along the Los Angeles Greenbelt project, so the water is there, you just got to hook up to the pipe.
Right.
Got it, so that's not a major. Okay,
It's not major, just have to make sure it's all purple and all that. And then in other areas, for the Commonwealth Nursery, we plan to upgrade the irrigation system that's within the concrete terraced area in the next fiscal year. At Captain's Roost, there's a new irrigation system that was installed recently, and a new trunk line that DWP installed from tank 151 was recently also placed. We now need to raise the solar panel that operates the pump to thwart vandalism, because we've had a problem with people just basically making the not operable because of the vandalism there. The Department of Water and Power, in the next motion, will be discussing the following park areas before you today, which will tie into their Griffith Park South Water Recycling Project, which is plans to reach the Roosevelt Golf Course, the Bird Sanctuary, and it can also be a tie-in to Vermont Canyon Roads and tennis courts, Ferndale Creek, Ferraro Fields, and the Equestrian Center. More park areas that need full upgrading in the future, some future date, will be Dante's View. Water Tank 151 services Dante's View, but it's not currently consistently providing adequate water supply. Also, the existing irrigation system there is antiquated and needs to be replaced. Amir's Garden needs work. New York City 1, 2, and 3 need work. Charlie Turner's Trail, 3 Mile Tree, Western Canyon Road, East and West Observatory Road, Cedar Grove, Vista de Valle, Potefield Road, and the Pony Rides. All these areas are going to need new irrigation systems.
Now, the sanitation has a new line coming through the park, correct? South of Crystal Springs?
Right.
And is there anything there that we could take advantage of? Because that's a reclaim, reuse line.
Not that I know of at this point, but
let's check and see if we could, because it comes across underneath the freeway and back through the Pony Rides area.
Right.
This is very encouraging. Thank you, Tom. This is the best map I've seen on this future.
Good.
So, good.
And we have with us the Department of Water and Power.
Susan Rogani for the Department of Water and Power. Just to summarize what the efforts have been for Water and Power in Griffith Park, we do have some maps and a fact sheet that's going to be passed us that will give you some of the detail in terms of what we're doing. But just to kind of reiterate what basically the Griffith Park South Water Recycling Project is, it is a tank, 1 billion gallon tank, pipeline and pump station, and to primarily get recycled water to the Roosevelt Golf Course, which is about 310 acre-foot a year of demand. And that would be the third golf course that we will be supplying in Griffith Park. We've already supplied the other 2 golf courses, existing golf courses, with recycled water. As Tom mentioned, there are other projects that we're looking at that are close to the Roosevelt Golf Course, which he mentioned the nursery, there's the Vermont Medians, there's the bird sanctuary, and there's the observatory, not the observatory, I'm sorry, the Greek theater. And what we've been doing is we've been working with Rec and Parks, so looking at some of the existing pipeline that they have that we may be able to utilize for getting the reclaimed water over from the Roosevelt Golf Course to these particular areas. One in particular, it looks like maybe in good enough shape, for instance, to get water to the nursery, we may be able to use already. There's a second pipeline that goes toward the bird sanctuary that may not be in that good of shape to use. So what my understanding is Rec and Parks has directed their planning department to look at that line and give them an estimate in terms of what it would take to actually revamp that line, so we may be able to use that for delivering recycled water in that area. So we are working with them, and we'll continue to meet with them in order to see what we could do to further the use of reclaimed water in the park.
So, Mr. Price and Mr. O'Farrell, thank you for this. This is just something that, it's hard to believe, I think it's 20 years that the Los Angeles Greenbelt project was first installed.
That's correct.
And right about 20 years, and there has been limited advancement, but now Water and Power is very focused on this and to be able to move forward. So I just wanted to thank you for taking it forward. I would like to take it to council, just a note and file, and just get people thinking reclaim water on that. Mr. Hans, you have any questions?
No questions, just regarding Ferndale. Friends of Griffith Park is engaged in a planning assessments with Department of Rec and Parks through the Planning Division. And right now, actually, we have hydrologists engaged at looking at water in Ferndale. Possibilities of creating better spring water flow. That's the only flow that is there currently. Creating some type of reservoir where it could be recirculated. Therefore, there may not even be a need for any type of additional water. We don't have the answers yet. There's also one other thing that we've learned. Recycled water, there's a little bit of a salinity issue with certain trees, such as redwoods, and of course Ferndale, Vermont Canyon, Bird Sanctuary have.
But I contest that, because if we don't have this water, we can't use it. So we got to look at the facts, get the facts back, and make sure Rec and Parks sees it the same way.
It's under study, and phase 2 of the Ferndale revitalization program has a budget of $250,000. Most of that money has been raised, and we're very much into the planning phase. Nothing implemented, just planning. And in the meantime, PAVA, of course, is maintaining Ferndale on a weekly basis.
Terrific.
Great.
Mr. Hunt?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. LaBunch, thank you.
I just want to say this, the biggest thing is to get reclaimed water to the park. Water brings life. And you see, and you were out on the river on Saturday, correct, Mr. Hans? The friends were, so one less friend, but you were all out there in a beautiful way. I came there late, and the water was so beautiful in the river. And to be able to use that in the park is what it's all about. I think water makes us stronger in so many ways. So if we look at the whole holistic thing, and I don't think we're going to be able to see Vermont Canyon, the Parkway, I say it with a Z, Zynoscope? What are you doing? Your Xeroscope? Xeroscape. I don't think you see that because of all that. So I'd want to get reclaimed there as fast as possible to do that. Jerry?
Just one other thing I'd like to add. This is the biology background in me. The natural areas of Griffith Park really don't need additional water. We're talking about the developed, the featured areas in Griffith Park. For example, above Ferndale is all natural.
But I want water there. I want water there. Members of the committee, I want water there so your hikers could come and see the sycamore. So this is the addition. This is where we wrestle, Jerry.
Along the roads, definitely the pine trees are dying because they're not getting enough water, but I'm seeing the natural habitat. is, it is what it is, and it has been that way for millions and millions of years. Thanks.
Got it, but I want to see water there, so I just know we disagree. So we're two friends who disagree. So thank you.
That's very helpful.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, note and file items
Okay.
10 and 11, and no public comment on either one. This committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Right.